Hello! Happy Hispanic Heritage Month. Hispanic Heritage Month is such a broad and vast and beautiful thing to celebrate, and Hispanic is kind of like an umbrella term. So we obviously can't cover everything, and not everything is kind of encased under that umbrella. Hispanic Heritage Month celebrates Hispanic and Latinx culture and heritage. Almost 20% of the United States population identifies as Latino or Hispanic, so almost 60 million people in this country identify as Latino or Hispanic, which is such a huge and beautiful part of our population. Latino, Latina, Latinx describes people with ties to Latin America, while Hispanic refers to Spain specifically, or people who speak Spanish, Spanish speakers. Hispanic Heritage Month started as just one day, but was extended to a whole month to better celebrate the culture as a whole, which now also means it includes several other countries' days of independence. September 15th is Independence Day for many countries, such as Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. Mexico's Day of Independence is September 16th. Chile's is September 18th. September 21st is Belize's Day of Independence. Latinos and Latinas have been a part of America since the American Revolution, despite constantly being left out of our history books. Hispanic and Latinx culture is all around us. It's impossible to separate America from Hispanic and Latinx cultures. It's impossible to deport Hispanic culture from America. Attempting to extinguish the Hispanic culture by unjustly and illegally deporting the people who built this country is not only immoral, inhumane, and unconstitutional, but it is deeply un-American. So let's celebrate, because they cannot steal our joy. We resist because it is the American way. I read 3 books for Hispanic Heritage Month. The first book I read was a memoir by Pierre Thomas. I also read a contemporary by Erica L. Sanchez, and I finished it off with a fantasy by Isabel Cañas. Okay, so the first book was this memoir by Pierre Thomas. It's called Down These Mean Streets. I ended up giving this book a 3.5 out of 5 stars. When I was looking for a memoir, I was really drawn to the duality of Pierre in this memoir. Him being Puerto Rican as well as dark skin led to an interesting duality of feeling too dark to be Puerto Rican and too Puerto Rican to be considered black. I didn't realize how old this book was. It was set in the 60s, but I assumed it was more modern, something within like the last 20 years, and that was 100% my fault. For as much as I love to read, I don't know how. I lied, actually. I think it was set in the 40s. It's been a minute since I actually read it. It first came out in the 60s, so yeah, it was set more in like the 1940s. Personally, I had a hard time with it. The way it was written was more in a vignette style than like an actual flow of a memoir. So you just get little tiny pieces of his life kind of glued together. It took a really long time to get to the part of the book that was actually described on the back of the book. So the back of the book advertised a, quote, constellation of drugs, street fighting, and armed robbery. But there really wasn't a lot of that until about over halfway through. There was not a lot of mention of drugs in the first half. It was sprinkled on top of the story with like a very light hand. And unless you consider violence against women street fighting, then there really wasn't a lot of that either. But there was definitely a lot of violence against women. Every section of this book, different women getting reduced down to possessions and getting yelled at or being abused. So if you do decide to read this book, I would definitely be very aware of that it's not an easy read by any means. I will say there is a surprise gay wedding, and the afterword of this book I think was very poignant as well. I think that really helped save the book. So once everything happens, about over halfway through, Pierre gets arrested and is sent to prison. And in the afterword, the author takes time to talk about the prison system and how at the time of this book takes place before the civil rights movement, there were not a lot of people of color in prison. And he does note that after the civil rights movement, that there has been a huge influx of unjustly imprisoning people of color compared to when he was in prison, and how he kind of got less harsh of a sentence before the civil rights movement, and how our prison system now is set up as a form of modern slavery. I do really appreciate how he took the time to add that as the afterword, with this being published in the 60s and then still being such a prevalent issue today of seeing the incarceration rates for Black and brown men is way higher than their white counterparts for the same crimes. Overall, I gave this a 3.5. I really did not love it until the surprise gay wedding, as well as the afterward, I think really helped save the book for me. But otherwise, it is just very dark and hard to get through. I would love to get some memoir recommendations for next year's Hispanic Heritage Month. If you have any memoirs that you've read by someone who's Hispanic or Latinx, then I would love to hear them, so please let me know. I also read I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter by Erica L. Sanchez. This book was so good. I am not a teenage girl anymore, but even still, this book was amazing. This book came out in 2017, and I still think that young women today are still relating to it very heavily. It was very, very good. I really, really liked it. My only issue was there were a couple of plot points that I think were very briefly mentioned and we didn't really get a lot of closure on. Like with Julia's best friend's creepy stepdad, I feel like he was mentioned and did like creepy things and like we just didn't really get a lot of closure on that. So I feel like it was very good. It's not super long and I feel like it touched on so many things that it could have been way longer if we got like full closure over everything, but I feel like it was just like so broadly painted. There were so many strokes and we only kind of got like an overview of what was inside of the book. I would have loved way more details. I would have loved it to be longer even. I wished it had been longer. I'd love to read way more about Julia and her going through her journey, trying to figure out what happened to her sister and who her sister was after her sister Olga had passed. I do feel like the ending was kind of rushed, like everything just kind of happened at once and then ta-da, it's over. It didn't really feel like there was that much closure on everything. It did kind of lose itself in the middle, I think, when Julia isn't so focused on Olga's death and who Olga was. For me, it kind of dropped off in the middle, and I do wish it had been more detailed. It does expand over a couple months to like over a year in the amount of time that it covers, so it goes through a lot of different things and a lot of different phases, and Julia being a teenage girl changes a lot in that time and grows a lot. So I would have loved to really either it be like kind of central into like a couple months instead of over a couple years, or just been like way longer. I would have read 4 more of these books, honestly. It was very well written. It was a really beautiful tale. And I think any young woman or any woman could really relate to this. Seeing Julia's complicated relationship with her mother, I think we all have complicated relationships with our mothers. Seeing like her mother not being the perfect Mexican mother to Julia's imperfect Mexican daughter. Just that kind of duality of being a woman and both of them being so stubborn and so alike and not being able to click and having like all these fights and all these hurtful things being said and done to each other unintentionally, just not feeling understood by the other. That was a really beautiful representation of a complicated relationship between a mother and daughter who obviously very much love each other, but don't always have the easiest time exploring that. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. I did really like it. It is one that I will continue to look upon fondly and maybe even reread one day. Again, my only issue was I wish that it had either been longer or it had touched on less. You know, it was just kind of in that awkward middle stage of like not being long enough to explore everything that it brought up and over explaining things that weren't necessary to the story. That was my only issue with it. Otherwise, it was great. I definitely recommend reading it if you want to see another side of a complicated relationship with your mother, your family in general. Points brought up about immigrating to the United States and what kinds of sacrifices Mexican families have to make to give themselves and their family the life that they deserve. And the final book I read for Hispanic Heritage Month, Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas. Holy shit, this book was so good. I literally could not put it down. I thought about this every second of every day. I came home, immediately started reading. Stayed up late reading it. I thought about this book every single day. I read this so quickly. I consumed this book with such a fiery passion. It was so good. It was also funny. The main character is super witty and clever and hilarious. I thought it was a really good like mix of 2 very popular vampire movies that came out this year with Nosferatu and Sinners. So Nenya, our female main character, and Nestor, our male main character, are part of a rancho in Tejas, like right on the border of Tejas and Mexico. They're kind of being hunted by white people, essentially, trying to take over this land, to colonize it. You're seeing white people come in and act as vampires, sucking the land dry and stealing, killing for their own sake, essentially. They're stealing the land and they're consuming everything that it has to offer. Instead of respecting the land and the people that live there and seeing them as human, they're the ones coming in and they're pale and scary and they have weapons that can kill you with the pull of a button. Who's the real monster here? Who are the vampires? Is it this mysterious being that is in the woods that can't come out in the daylight? Or is it white people? Who's to say? I think the characters in this book were really well done. I think they were very well fleshed out and like interesting people. They were almost tangible. Like I could feel them. I could understand them. I could see them so perfectly in my head. They were very complex characters. They were not very straightforward, cut and dry. They only had one personality trait. They were well-rounded and well-written. Even the vampires, I think, were so well done and well-written and taken in a unique way that was not your typical Twilight, Nosferatu, even Sinners kind of story. I think it was its own very unique take on vampires. I loved it. No notes. Obviously, this got a 5 out of 5. What else can I say? It was so good. You should definitely read this book. As part of Hispanic Heritage Month, I didn't want to just read books and call it a day. Culture is so much more vast than just these 3 books on my shelf that I read. So I wanted to celebrate the culture in other ways as well. Spent some time obviously reading and learning about Hispanic cultures, engaging in Hispanic cultures in my own community, taking my husband out to eat at local Hispanic restaurants. Besides reading and eating as my 2 main hobby, my 3rd main hobby, crafting. I love a craft. So I was looking up different Hispanic cultures, crafts, and activities to do to celebrate the culture. There were so many options, obviously. Huge culture, huge amount of options to choose from. One that stuck out to me was Huichol art, specifically their yarn painting. That's the coolest thing I've ever heard of. The Huichol community are descendants from Aztecs. They are an indigenous peoples in Mexico, and one of the art forms that they are most known for is yarn painting, which they will like take a board and then they put beeswax on it, and then they kind of carve out a design, and then they will press yarn into the beeswax to make a painting out of the yarn. It's so cool. I'll insert some pictures because it's stunning. It is so, so beautiful. All kinds of Mexican art that I've ever seen is very vibrant and almost neon in its portrayals of color. They have such a command over color. The yarn painting is certainly no different. I love to knit. Obviously, we do our stab and gabs. So yarn is something I have an abundance of. I don't have any beeswax, but I do have canvas board and a lot of Mod Podge. My husband and I took some time. We watched Coco and we made some yarn paintings, which was so much fun. I'll show you the yarn paintings that we made at the end. Going back to the Huichol population and their yarn art, historically they would use the yarn painting as well as beadwork to reflect their relationships with deities or their ancestors, and then they also made them as offerings to gods. It has modernized quite a bit. It's become more something that each individual artist has their own unique style and take on. And while it is something that is part of their income and their livelihood, it is still something that is very symbolic and still can tell a story, still be representative, and still seen as offerings to gods, deities, or representative of their ancestors. So while it did become something that was very popular for tourists to pick up on and purchase, the Huichol artists are still using that as an opportunity to tell their story and their history and celebrate their culture through their yarn painting and their beadwork. Go get the paintings that my husband and I made. So we started by taking a canvas and sketching a design on there, and then going in section by section and just adding like a pile of glue, and then pressing the yarn into it. With Dominic being Mexican and Dia de los Muertos is coming up, he decided to go with a sugar skull. It's so freaking cool. He's the coolest person I know. This is ridiculous. Look at this. Are you kidding me? This is the coolest thing I've ever seen. He did such a good job. It's crazy. Crazy to me. It's honestly not fair to be married to an artist. I deserve financial compensation. I decided to put a nod to the cover of I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter. I thought surely I could do that. It seems simple enough. It was not. I struggled so much with this. My entire body, I think, was covered in glue by the time I was finished. But this is mine. Oh my gosh, you can't even see the colors. See, I added her braid on. It's like 3D because I messed up. It's not bad. It's not a one-to-one comparison, but it's not bad. I gave her a halo. It felt right. I thought it fit the narrative as well of her struggling with her spirituality, with her being not perfect, and not the perfect Mexican daughter, not being a saint. I don't know. I thought it fit. I thought it worked well. Yeah, it looks pretty good. It's not bad. It's not perfect. It's certainly not that freaking sugar skull. That's ridiculously good. And obviously, Preachel art, impeccable. So, not bad for a first timer. Not bad for a white girl. And I think with that, we've concluded Hispanic Heritage Month. It was really beautiful. I had a lot of fun. It was really, really fascinating to learn about all the kinds of different cultures embedded in Hispanic heritage. It was really fun to celebrate through books and art and food. I think that's a great way to celebrate anything. I'm always down for those three things. If you read any fun books for Hispanic Heritage Month, please let me know. Drop them in the comments. I would love to know what we're reading. And if you have any recommendations for next year or any other ways that you've celebrated Hispanic heritage, I would love to hear about it. So please let me know. Next up, we are celebrating Palestine in October. As always, free Palestine. And as always, fuck ICE. I hope that they all rot. If you see ICE, say something. Watch out for ICE in your city. Keep our Hispanic heritage population and our Latinx heritage populations safe. We would not be American without them. We built the borders around them. We cannot deport them from our culture, from our history. So they are part of us. We are part of them. And we are all supposed to be here together. That was the point of America. No one is illegal on stolen land. We're going to keep celebrating Hispanic heritage, and no one can stop us. We will keep fighting, and we will keep resisting. We're going to make sure that our Hispanic brothers and sisters have a safe place to do that. Thank you so much for being here. Let me know if any of these books are ones that you want to read, or if you've read any of them. Shop local, support your local Hispanic-owned restaurants and arts and shops, and have a great rest of your October. Okay, love you. Bye.